taken an interest in finding out more about going on to college. I know when I went to college, it was one of the scariest things of my life. And then when you complicate it with some disabilities or some anxieties, or, I mean, even if you don't have an anxiety issue, you will probably when you start those college classes. So that is our goal, is to make the transition a little bit easier. Maybe not easy, but easier. So I am the transition coordinator at Central Crossing High School. Grant Abbott is sitting out there. He is the transition coordinator at Westland High School. Back here is Sarah Wall. She is a district transition coordinator. Wendy Mitchell is the transition coordinator at Franklin Heights. And Ashley Fenner is the transition coordinator at Grove City High School. So at any time, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to one of us. If you're like me, once you get home, you'll go, oh, I should have asked about this, that, you know, that kind of thing. So we can be your resource. But, we have 3 people with us tonight. I'm going to let Chris Williams go first. Chris is the person that is assigned to Central Crossing for an organization called I Know I Can. He is a great support for students that are interested in going on to college. So I will let him describe what he can do and how he can help your student. But it's been wonderful having him at Central Crossing. And then we have Callie. I'm not going to say her last name, so I'll get it wrong. Callie from Ohio State Disability Services, and Jill is from Columbus State Disability Services. So I'll ask some questions, they'll answer, but you will also have opportunity to ask questions. If you can keep them general when you're asking your questions, and then we'll have some time afterwards if you have questions about specifically about your child. All right, so Chris, go ahead.
So again, my name is Christopher Williams II, and I am the College Advising Manager at Central Crossing High School. My job, and what I tell all of our students, is my job is to help you bridge the gap from being in Central Crossing High School and either enrolling in college, going straight into employment, or enlisting in the military. So whatever career you're trying to have after you leave Central Crossing, it's my job to help you connect those dots. In my role, I work with 11th and 12th graders, and there is an 11th and 12th grade representative at all of the district high schools outside of the Career Academy. And then outside of Central Crossing, many of your students will also have a 9th and 10th grade representative that will go into their classrooms and have them start thinking about these things as well. A lot of my time is spent chasing our seniors around and saying, okay, when you graduate, what is your plan? And then they'll tell me, oh, I, am connected with this internship through my transition coordinator, and I plan on going straight into work, or I plan on applying to these colleges and this and that, or I plan on enlisting, or whatever their plan is. And I tell them my job is to give you options. It's your job to pick the best option that is for you. For example, sometimes I'll talk to students and they're like, oh, I'm considering Columbus State. And I'm like, okay, well, in addition to Columbus State, I would like you to apply to between 3 to 5 schools. So like, can we add a few more schools onto that list? And it just depends on where they're at. I do have access to like GPAs and stuff like that. So I don't like to set our students up for disappointment. So like I try to keep their expectations realistic. But one thing that I'm excited about tonight is you have 2 wonderful institutions that, like I also help students fill out the FAFSA. If your student is eligible for the Pell Grant, the max that they can get is $6,000. $6,000 will allow them to go to Columbus State debt-free. In fact, they'll get about $1,400 back to help pay for books, transportation, food, all that good stuff. And then Ohio State University, if your student chooses to go there, they have a grant that stacks on top of the Pell Grant, so they could possibly go to Ohio State for free. So I help students connect those dots with their next steps in their college or career planning. And I hope you find money for it too.
Very important. Are there any questions specifically for Chris about I Know I Can?
I have a question. We just recently moved, I was born and raised here, we moved back from Florida. Michael graduated in Florida. When we got here, it's like the resource that I've been born for so long, it's the reason why we came here. We're having a hard time connecting the dots. So given the fact that, you know, he's just not coming out of high school, he graduated last year, is that a program that he can actually still attend? Or, like, obviously he still wants to continue his education. So
Okay.
that's what we're trying to do.
So he graduated from a Florida
Born high
school?
from Florida,
Okay.
a different school district.
So as far as, and he's not taking classes in Southwestern City School District. So I Know I Can is not a mean-spirited organization. Like, if he came by the I Know I Can office in German Village, like, we're not gonna turn him away. But as far as like, where we target students, we are in Columbus City Schools, Southwestern, and in Whitehall. So if he wanted help, like, our
He
office,
lives in the Southwestern School District though.
but he's not.
No, but he's not, he's graduated already, but that's the whole point of getting him from IEP transitioning over from high school to, like, we just did it in a different state, you know what I mean?
Right.
We'll cover a lot of that tonight. I
Okay,
think you'll
great.
feel better about things once you get some
Perfect.
information from us.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be
Thank you.
helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, absolutely.
All right. So Chris, you can have a seat if you want, or you can stand up here and.
Keep us company, come on.
Okay.
Before I worked with I Know I Can, I worked in Miami University and Ohio University's admissions office, so I can field questions from them a little bit, but they don't sign my check anymore, so I might tell you to check with their admissions offices.
Okay. All right, so would you ladies introduce yourselves, tell a little bit about your background and some of what you do, what's your day is like?
I will. My name is Jill Anderson. I primarily work with College Credit Plus students, but I also have a caseload of students who are more traditional, who came to us before College Credit Plus got its footing. I was a sign language interpreter for about 20 years before I started working in disability services as an advocate, and I really enjoy what I do. Columbus State's a phenomenal place for students to come kind of figure out if college is their thing or not. Lots of options for jobs also coming out of school.
Good evening, I'm Callie Bona. I'm a lead access specialist at Ohio State. I've been at Ohio State since October of 2018. Prior to that, I came from a tiny town, Gallipolis, Ohio, in southeastern Ohio, where I worked in disability services at a very tiny institution for 7.5 years. And so in my transition, and I was talking a little bit before we started tonight, I've always been really, really passionate about really getting those students connected, right? There's a lot of differences between high school and college, and really just making that connection as early on as possible. I come from a really rural area where I worked with parents sometimes more than the students, especially in the beginning. And so I think a lot can be said about sort of that, developing that relationship in the beginning. Our office at Ohio State is staffed with 5 access specialists, and so we assign access specialists based on students' colleges and their majors of study. We do that because we're a very large institution. We have about 3,500 students currently registered with us who seek accommodations for all sorts of disabilities. We provide the liaisons in terms of our college model access specialist programming so that we can really bridge the gap of communication on a larger campus. So we're in the process now of really developing and streamlining those relationships inside of academic programs so that we can help connect students and really connect with their professors and get them the accommodations that they are approved for and accustomed to.
Can you start off by describing one of the ways that high school was different from college? There's a gazillion, but if you each like pick one and highlight those differences.
Yeah, students wake up and they're adults and they have to do everything themselves all of a sudden, right? So no longer is somebody seeking them out in a classroom setting and saying, you know, you're entitled to these services because you have had them since you were in, you know, K-12. And so really, I would say just from my perspective, when I'm meeting students from the time that their college visits are happening, when they're sophomores or juniors in high school, I'm talking to them about that. And I'm sure that's happening so much in these programs that these two wonderful individuals are part of here too, is just making sure that they know they have to ask. right? They have to initiate the first steps to get registered with our offices.
I would say that we tend to scare students when we say that college is so different than high school, and I don't like that model necessarily. College is different than high school in some very, very good ways. And some of it has to do with the fact that you guys now run the show. Now you get to run the show whether you are good at it or not. That's where we come in to kind of help you, guide you. We want you to come to our office not just to have accommodations and extra time to take your tests and all that kind of stuff that you need, but also come to our office as like a connection point for you on campus. Columbus State's a big school. Now, it's not a big school like necessarily on our Columbus campus, but we also have a Delaware campus and several regional learning centers around Central Ohio. So altogether, I think we're in the 30,000-ish range of students. That's a lot of people, and especially if you're coming from high school, even though Central Crossing is a decent-sized high school, still, you will probably not see anybody that you know on campus in your classes. And that, in my mind, is a really good thing, because nobody knows your backstory, right? They don't know what you went through in high school. They don't know whether you were bullied. They don't know anything. So you get to be who you want to be, who you actually are, as opposed to who other students have kind of framed you to be. Does that make sense?
I would say one of the things that's like vastly different is in college, you are more so focusing on a career field that you are passionate about, right? So while you may have to take some general electives like a college composition, a college algebra class, once you start getting into those major related classes, you're really focusing on what you want to do. Me, when I was in high school, I wanted to be a pilot. When I went off to college, my first semester, I was flying planes, right? That's what I wanted to do. I excelled in those classes. Later on, I switched my major to aviation management. And
now you're with Illinois.
And like when I took econ was not my passion, okay? I wanted to be out there flying planes. So when I took econ, I struggled a little bit, but again, you are your own advocate in college. So I sought out my professor for office hours. I joined a study group, and my school had something called supplemental instruction. So it was an extra study session sponsored by the school, and that's how I made it through accounting. But with your program, you pursue the things that you're passionate about, and it's less about people telling you, you have to take this because you got to meet this state requirement. You have to take the classes that you're required to take because you're pursuing this passion in college.
So I think one of the things that you need to remember is when you are in Southwestern City Schools, you have a case manager, and that person writes your IEP, they check up on you, they make sure that you're getting your accommodations, that you don't have that person following you around. You will have someone at Disability Services, however, their role is not being your advocate as much as you being your own advocate. So can you talk about how you get services through Disability Services? It's not an automatic. You need to pursue and advocate for yourself, saying that I need these services, and let us know when is a good time to do that.
So if you're planning to come in the fall, Columbus State is really going to be different than what Callie has to tell you, because Ohio State operates on a different kind of, their application process is way more extensive than ours. If you plan to come to Columbus State, you can apply to Columbus State tonight. There's no cost to apply to Columbus State. It doesn't take any time. So you apply to the school, you'll get this wonderful email from Dr. Harrison saying, welcome to Columbus State. Everybody is accepted to Columbus State. We are an open enrollment school. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody can take classes at Columbus State. We do need ACT scores that meet a certain number or placement test scores, and we can help you with placement testing with accommodations and things like that if you need them. So if you're coming in the fall, apply anytime, okay? But I don't need to see your documentation, your IEP, ETR, please both of those together if possible, your 504 plan, and if it has an ETR, that'd be great. Note from your doctor, we're really flexible about documentation. There's a form on our website that if you don't have anything, which I would assume if you're here tonight, you've got something related to your high school, but if you don't, you can have your personal physician fill this out and document that they've been working with you with ADHD medication or something along those lines. Okay. I need to see all of that maybe in May. Sometimes I tell students, if you're a senior and you're coming to me in the fall, enjoy your last month of high school. March across the stage, have the big parties, turn the tassel, and then come and see me. I don't need to see you earlier than that. I love it when parents come in and they've got their checklist, right? We're gonna do this, we gotta knock that off, we're gonna go over here, we're gonna do a tour, we're gonna do this. That's awesome. But remember, if your student isn't starting until August, all of that stuff is gonna go away from their mind. They're not gonna remember it. So it's much better for you guys to come to us in the spring. You'll come to an orientation in June, July, or August. Then you'll do the tour, they'll help you get set up with your classes, all that good stuff, and then come and see us, and we'll teach you how to use your accommodations. Yes.
Yeah, so obviously Ohio State is not open enrollment, so the difference would be the formal acceptance first into our school. And then you can get registered with Student Life Disability Services by completing an online student application. We recently switched to an online student portal sort of module in our office, so students complete an 11-question application that just asks them about their diagnosis, have they received accommodations before. If not, that's okay, certainly, but if they have, then describe that a little bit. After they complete those 11 questions, the application online directly takes them to the next page where they can upload electronic documentation to their application. Once they submit with the documentation, that's considered complete, and we have about a 3 to 5 business day turnaround on our end to review that application and make sure nothing's missing. Either way, we'll reach back out to your student within those 5 business days and let them know, schedule your intake appointment, and or we need something a little extra. As far as documentation goes, very similar to what Columbus State has. I would say we're pretty liberal in terms of what we accept. So the IEPs, the 504 plans. We also have an online disability verification form that can be filled out by a clinician of some sort. And so once we get that, as long as it has a diagnosis present, we have students take screenshots of their MyCharts and submit that, right? So again, pretty liberal. We definitely don't want to create any additional barriers with the documentation piece. We can also, and again, I'm not sure, as you mentioned, this would relate as much to you all, but if you're talking to other people, we can provisionally approve students in our office. So if they're in the process of getting a diagnosis or they're starting to experience some new symptoms that they hadn't experienced before, if they can show us that they're in that clinical process of seeking that diagnosis, we can provisionally get them approved for 1 semester until they have that. I think that's probably enough as far as that question goes.
And again, if your student needs assistance applying to either one of these schools or any other school, their I Know I Can advisor is there to help, because sometimes college applications can be confusing. And then if you are going on college visits, then you can ask the admissions office, like, how do I contact student accessibility services? And a lot of times at universities' orientations, that's a good time to get connected so that your student can get the services that they need. So
I want to add a couple more things. One is, if you're not planning to come to Columbus State or Ohio State, awesome, but check the website of the school that you are planning to go to, because we're a little flexible with our documentation, but some schools want it to be no more than 3 years old. It has to be from a certain kind of doctor, that kind of stuff. So you want to make sure that you're not surprised by that as you're packing your kid up to go to college and you find out, oh my goodness, we don't have the right documentation. The second thing I wanted to say is, when you apply to a college, you will never have to disclose that you have a disability. It should never be on the application.
And like, admissions offices are not able to take that into consideration.
Right, it's not a thing. It's off the table. You don't even need to disclose. So I just wanted to encourage you in that way. So we get that question sometimes, it's like, do I have to tell the school that I have a disability? No. you don't.
So it's not required. If your student wants to disclose in an essay, like, we can help them tailor that essay, but a school is not allowed to say, oh, because this student has this accessibility service, like they are admitted or denied. That is illegal. Like, you do not have to send in like an IEP, 504 plan or anything like that to an admissions office. So like if your test score was low because maybe you have ADHD, like, and you want to disclose that, then you can, but colleges are not allowed to like base their decisions solely on that. So if you have questions about that, I can talk to you. I review college essays all day.
Big time.
And I've read them, a million of them, for 7 years. So I'm pretty good at the college essay.
Ideally then, you would access the disability services before your semester starts. However, I'm sure that that doesn't always happen because I know teenagers. So is there ever a point when it's too late? Maybe I am taking accounting and I am in way over my head and I'm getting an F and now all of a sudden I'm starting to panic. Can I come to disability services at that point, or am I going to be retaking accounting?
You can come to us anytime, but please don't put it off. Even if you don't think you're going to use your accommodations, come and get registered with us anyway. I'd rather you have those accommodations available to you than be the student in my office November 1st crying because they're failing and we're past the drop date. Those are the kinds of things that we see a lot, and just save yourself the heartache of it, okay? It's really hard to fix a mistake. It's way better to head the mistake off by going ahead and coming on in and getting registered. It's really quite easy. We're very easy to talk to. It's usually a very low-key thing.
Yeah, the same can be said at Ohio State. We get students who register from the first day of the semester until the last day before finals, and that's all okay. And students are always like, I wish I would have come sooner, I should have listened to mom and dad. For whatever reason they did, and that's okay. Accommodations, unfortunately, are not mandated legally to be applied retroactively. So what we can do, though, when the students get connected sometimes, depending on where we are in the semester, is we can send advocacy language to faculty and try to, have some of those things applied looking backwards, but we can't make any guarantees. So I would absolutely piggyback off what she said. The sooner, the better. Oftentimes I tell students and parents it's an insurance policy, right? We pay for that every month. We don't really want to have to use it, but if we do, it's there, right? And if we're not doing that, initiating, it is unfortunately a little more difficult to implement those accommodations.
Couple other things. Mom and dad can't make that appointment for you. So if you're used to mom and dad making your appointments for you and you're a senior in high school this year, now's the time. You will not die if you call the doctor and make an appointment. You will not die if you call the hair salon and make an appointment. It's a good time to be practicing those skills because mom and dad are not going to be in your corner. We're not legally allowed to talk to them. So it's you and me, babe. What was the second thing I was going to say? It'll come back to me.
One of the things that I try to give students advice on is, again, being proactive, right? When I worked in admissions and students would ask me about student disability services, I would always tell them, you can register and like maybe you get extra test time in every class, but you only need it for math, you don't need it for your composition class. Use it for math, then don't use it for composition, right? But like they said, it serves as an insurance policy. And then also like a step beyond that, if you're in high school and you're taking trig or algebra 2 or whatever, and that's not your best subject, in college, you can be proactive and get a tutor. If you know you're not good at math, get a tutor. It's better to get a tutor and say, I don't need this tutor, I understand these concepts, than to say, oh, it's midterms, I'm failing this class, like I have to get a 287 to get a C in the class. So be proactive not only with student disability services, but also if there's a subject that you struggle in, like go and get a tutor. You can form study groups early on because everybody in college, like especially as a freshman, everybody is new, and they're all trying to make new friends, and that's one easy way to make friends. And then all of your professors are going to be required to have office hours, right? So if you're not understanding a class or you're struggling in it, meet with that professor, because sometimes that can like make a huge difference. Like they see you trying in the class and maybe you're at a C+ and they bump you up to a B-. That doesn't always happen, but if you put in the work, then it'll be rewarded.
All right, so if I get approved for disability services, I know one of the things that's on my to-do list is to email the teachers at Central Crossing, because our second semester starts on Tuesday, and I'm going to remind the teachers who have second semester classes, don't forget to look at IEPs and 504 plans for students in your new semester classes. So do you guys do that at the college level?
We don't. When you do your intake with us, we give you this thing called a letter of accommodation. It's a document that you're going to then share with your instructor. I don't care if you email it to them or hand it to them personally. I have students who do either. Sometimes it's good to email it because then you can say, yes, I did send it to you on November 5th or whatever. But we leave that kind of up to you to disclose to the instructor, because it's up to you if you're going to actually even use your accommodations in that class. Maybe you are absolutely brilliant at biology and you think you're not going to need your accommodations. You don't have to share your letter of accommodation. I think you should, but you don't absolutely have to. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so our new student portal called AIM, students log into that ideally in the first couple of days of the semester, but it happens sort of all throughout the semester. And they generate what's called a course accessibility letter, and this is their conversation starter with their faculty. This letter says, "Dear instructor, I'm registered with SLDS," of course not disclosing the diagnosis, also different in college. Faculty don't have that need to know why students are registered with us. And then students select the accommodations for which they're approved that need to show up on each of those letters. So very individualized in how they're sort of developing those, and then that system automatically emails the professors, but the students go in and request that to happen. I then tell students, okay, that's step one, now what, right? Is this the only thing we're gonna do? Generally not, because then there's gonna be an exam accommodation process or attendance and deadline flexibility process that students need to pursue further. We can talk about that more later, maybe. I'm not sure if we're gonna go into that. So yeah, it's very self-directed by the students, and then so is the follow-up with their faculty. We're there though, we can be a part of those conversations if we need to be, but the students need to take that first step.
And I know that there's no typical accommodations, but can you give me some examples of your more common accommodations that students use, what the testing situations would be like, that kind of thing?
Yeah, at Ohio State, our most common accommodations are exam accommodations. So your extended time, your distraction-reduced testing spaces. We also can provide, the private rooms. We can provide a scribe or a reader. We have staff, on site who can provide those services. We also have attendance and deadline flexibility. We approve this accommodation for students who have conditions that flare up unexpectedly. So a lot of mental health or chronic pain conditions, we approve that accommodation to have students start a conversation with their faculty members early on, due to unpredictable flare-ups of my condition, there's a possibility I might have to miss class, or I might lose out on a participation points 1 week, or I might miss a quiz or an exam or a deadline. And so how is a flexibility going to be applied for me throughout the semester? Also something we hope will be put into place proactively so that that student's not penalized for something that's out of their control. Those are our most common.
I think that we're very, very similar to Ohio State. I think we've even shared staff at some points along the way. We do a lot of testing accommodations. We actually have a testing center in disability services, and a lot of students choose to come to us and take their tests just because it's sort of a familiar spot. But we also have large testing centers at all of the regional learning centers and campuses as well. We try and encourage students towards the technology of testing, meaning instead of putting a live body in the room to read to you, we use a computer program called Read and Write. Similar to probably what you guys are using in the high school, but like a college version of it, I think. We also have a lot of technology-related things for low vision, for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. I mean, just kind of the gamut of things. So.
We do have a testing center also. I definitely
I thought so,
failed
yeah.
to mention that. Yeah, so students approved for exam accommodations, of course, again, all in their control. So they can opt to take their exams in class with no accommodations. They can opt to work with the professor. Sometimes faculty members provide accommodations internal to their program. Faculty likes to be accessible if students have questions the same way they are for all the other students in the class. So we're seeing that happening more and more often, which is wonderful. And then students, the most common though is for students to test in our testing center.
I do want to say one thing. Kelly mentioned flexibility with attendance deadlines and things like that. That is an accommodation that's, at least in our area, fairly rarely approved. So if you have that on your IEP where you get to turn stuff in a week late, now's the time to stop doing that if you're a senior. Or at least work hard to get those things in on time. Because in college, they give you a syllabus on the very first day of school, and you know when stuff is going to be due for the next 16 weeks. So it's not like they write it on the board and it's due the next day. You have lots of time to look ahead and start working on those projects and things. And that's something that if you're confused by that, come and see me. Because we can sit down together, map that out for you, similar to chunking of assignments like you guys have in high school, right? But on the college level. Because if you turn it in late, it's late, and there's usually a pretty significant point or grade penalty attached to that.
Yeah, and I will say too, we don't approve that accommodation for students who don't have a chronic condition of some sort,
Yeah.
right? And so we do get students who come and they did have that as an accommodation in high school. Maybe they have ADHD and time management or organization skills or something they need to work on. So oftentimes those are a Dennis Learning Center. It's one of the academic coaching resources we have on campus who can provide professional academic coaches to students to kind of help them work through that, right? So let's look at that syllabus of 16 weeks worth of assignments and make sure we're not going to have to utilize that turning it in late because we are going to be penalized. So yeah.
Bad news, right?
Yes.
Womp womp.
Do you have questions? General questions about accommodations in college, how college might be different?
Students, anything worrying you about coming to college? I like to ask that question. Anything keeping you up at night when you think about it? No?
No questions about test scores?
A lot of support on campus. Any campus, well, I know for us in Ohio State both. We have tutoring labs, we have just lots and lots of support. Counseling center, I know they have as well. Whatever I say, they're going to have to because they're, you know, the Ohio State University, and they've just got a lot of resources and great stuff. So you, not just from our end disability-wise, but just from a campus-wide goal of getting you in, kind of acclimated, settled in, and then helping you succeed and keep going from semester to semester.
Is there like it was mentioned like I don't want to say a trial, but there's a week before school starts in August where they can kind of go and get acclimated and...
We have orientation, and Ohio State does too, because I know my daughter went there, where you come in and it's not a week. Well, yours is longer though, right?
We have them, I swear, every 2 weeks forever, and they happen. Yeah, I think it depends on the student and like their program. Sometimes they are doing an orientation that also includes things within their program, and so sometimes it's like 2 days. I think that's the max though.
Ours is the bulk of a day,
Yeah.
and you come in and like we tell you how to take notes, which I was going to touch on. That's what I was going to touch on. But when you come to orientation, we'll tell you about the campus, how to find tutoring, all that kind of stuff. And then at the end of the day, you will sit down with an academic advisor and create your schedule for the first and second semester that you're at Columbus State. And then they'll take you on a tour so you can say, oh, I have a class in Union Hall, and that's Union Hall, and it'll help you kind of figure that out.
So are you talking about Columbus State specifically?
Yeah.
That program, I believe it is called College Success Express. Don't quote me on that, because last year was my first time working with it. So they do have something like that. I don't know all the details off the top of my head, but there is a program where they would be able to come in a little bit early.
The goal is to bump up the placement test scores.
Yeah.
So I think they start out with the placement test at the beginning of the week, And usually I feel like it heavily lands in math, because that's where people kind of struggle with is math. And then they do a bunch of tutoring and help and help and help and tutoring, and then by the end of the week, they hope to retest you and have your scores be higher than what they were. If you have not taken ACTs, or if you have taken them and your numbers aren't making you happy, we can always give you placement tests. That's not a problem. We can also give you accommodations for the placement tests. We just need to know that you need them. And in order to do that, you'll need to get your documentation to us. So we can look through it and kind of put some provisional placement testing accommodations in place for you. The other thing I was going to say is note-taking. Note-taking is a challenge. I'm surprised how often I see students who have not had to do very much of it, because guided notes are a thing and everybody likes to fill in the blank, but that doesn't happen in college. And so if you're a senior, or even if you're not, now's the time to get that notebook out and try to take notes in your classes. Figure out what works for you. We let students record lectures. That's one of the accommodations that we have. If your high school instructors are okay with it, record it on your phone, take some notes, and then listen back to it and see how you did. Because in college, the main method of teaching is the instructor literally stands up in front of the class and talks to you for an hour and a half. And there's not super fun things that go on, and they don't play games very often and things like that. They're expecting you to listen, take notes, use those notes to study for their exams, and then pass their exams. That's how college rolls for the most part. So start now, practice.
Note-taking assistance is a big one we provide as well. We provide 3 options for students who have note-taking assistance. So the first one is instructor-provided notes, always with the caveat that the professor can't say no to that, right? And sometimes they don't have notes to share. Sometimes there are copyright issues with them sharing their notes. And then the other 2 options are the recording technology. We really sort of amp up a technology called Sonocent, but there are several with the technology of the iPads. Everybody who comes to Ohio State as an incoming freshman gets an iPad.
What?
Does they do that?
No.
Well,
We're poor.
I don't know where it came from. It's very
awesome.
new, but it's equipped with certain note-taking technology that's interactive. So as it's recording, students can write with their whatever the fancy pen thing on an stylus. Yeah. Okay. So
There's actually an app called Notability that runs with the iPad. So if you happen to have an iPad, lucky you.
Yeah.
Try that in your high school classes, right? Take your iPad, download Notability. I think it's a freebie.
There are paid versions, but the freebie does it for the majority of
Yeah,
our
and then
students.
just use the stylus or your finger or whatever you need to do. Try that to see if that helps.
The third option that we approve for students is a Notetaker Volunteer. So if the students opt to have this as an option for them, then on that course accessibility letter to the professor, it says that the student would like to have a Notetaker Volunteer. Professors then prompted to make an announcement to the class, either during lecture or via email, that says they're looking for someone to share copies of their notes. So somebody who's already in the classroom, engaged, knows that that's a strong point for them, can get compensated by our office $25 per credit hour. So there's a lot of incentive there. So this is meant to be something that supplements your students' notes. We have a lot of students utilizing that, so it's a really great service too.
We don't pay note takers. And we have a notebook that's like carbon paper, but most of my students would rather die than find somebody in class to take notes for them, just being honest. So, if you're really like a energetic kind of fun, like say hi to everybody in class person, that's awesome. And it's actually a great technology because you don't have to go then look for a copier to make copies of your notes. But most of my students would rather quietly record and use their LiveScribe pens or whatever.
You mentioned the orientation week. One bit of advice that I have given to several students is instead of starting at Columbus State or whatever college you choose to attend in the fall, perhaps take a class during the summer. There's not as many people down on, I guess this specifically applies to Columbus State because you can go down there. So just take 1 or 2 classes, kind of start small. That gives you a chance to get in when there's not as many students. You find your way around campus, kind of ease some of that anxiety so that when there's 30,000 people there, you know you're not so overwhelmed, but.
One big caveat with that is summer semester is 11 weeks long instead of 16, and we cover 16 weeks worth of information in 11. So typically that means that, not that the instructor is talking faster, but that the classes last longer. So you literally could be on your butt in a math class for a couple of hours, a couple of times a week. Something to think about, just, yeah.
Also to piggyback on that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think if you are taking summer class, you need to fill out the previous year's FAFSA.
Yes,
Yep,
ma'am.
yep.
Yes, you
That way,
absolutely do.
because the FAFSA starting in the fall will cover that summer term.
Yes,
So
so
both
thank
things
you.
to think about.
So thank you for making my
Yep.
point.
I've been
So-
a transition coordinator for a minute, transition coordinator for a minute, a couple things.
So if you are looking to take classes over the summer, you would need to fill out the FAFSA twice. So let's use current seniors right now, right? So current seniors, they graduate in 2020. So if you're filling out the FAFSA with a senior, you file the FAFSA for the 2020-2021 school year. And that money will be dispersed for fall semester. If you're looking to take a class over the summer, then you need to file the FAFSA for the 2019-2020 school year so that the FAFSA, so the federal funds will cover that summer semester, and then you'll want to file it for 2020. So pretty much you would just have to fill the FAFSA out 2 times. If you have questions about that, your I Know I Can College Access Manager can help you. So like if you're planning on taking summer classes, literally all you have to do is let your college advising manager know, and we'll know to help you fill out the FAFSA for the summer semester in addition to your fall semester. So we got you covered. Thank you.
If you, 2 questions. If you've been accepted into the College Credit Plus program, do you need to reapply? And if your ACT scores were adequate, but you're already doing College Credit Plus, is there anything additional?
So no new application. That Columbus State used to make you reapply, and you don't have to do that anymore. But if your ACT scores weren't high enough, you can't take College Credit Plus classes because they have to be placing you into English 1100, freshman English, and out of reading courses for the most part. There's some weird, the state has given us some little exceptions to those, but literally a 5 on writing and a 250 on reading is what you need for College Credit Plus. So you don't have to retest, I guess. The retaking of the ACT and placement testing and stuff is only if you're not in College Credit Plus. It's like if you don't make cutoff scores, if you are in calculus or trig or something like that, and you take a placement test and you place into developmental math, that's not right. So we need to figure out what went wrong, and you can retake that placement test. Please don't take a developmental class if you don't need to take a developmental class, because that's extra money that you're spending or money that you're borrowing on a student loan when maybe you were good to go, but you just kind of had a bad day at placement testing or whatever.
Do you all understand developmental classes? Maybe an explanation of those.
I mean, what if they're currently in a developmental math class?
In College Credit Plus?
So it wouldn't
No.
be through College Credit Plus.
If you're in a developmental math class in College Credit Plus, it's something that you've paid out of pocket to do. Yeah, so we can talk about that. Yeah, no worries. We'll
But
figure it out.
one of the cool things about Columbus State is if your student is in College Credit Plus and taking 3 credit hours or more, and they choose to continue on with Columbus State, 1, they don't have to fill out a new application. And 2, there is a $1,000 scholarship that students get for continuing on after College Credit Plus. So if you're in College Credit Plus now, and you're like, hey, I plan on attending Columbus State, then there's a $1,000 scholarship that you could be eligible for by continuing your college education with them.
You have to have completed 2 credits in CCP, and you have to have a 3-something GPA. That's it.
Any other questions? Nothing?
have dorms. I mean, some students are surprised by that. We are a commuter school, so you live at home with mom and dad, and you come to campus and you leave, which makes it a little bit harder to get plugged in, because a lot of our students just come for that segment of time. One beauty of the Ohio State University is that you're on their campus, right? And you're in those dorms for the first 2 years, right? And so you get to meet people, and it's a neat experience if you can qualify to do that.
But one way, whether you are living at home and going to Columbus State, or living on campus with Ohio State University, you need to get up, get out of your room, and get involved. So even if you are going to a commuter school, Columbus State has a ton of student organizations that you can participate in. Sometimes students, they're like, hey, I want to go to Ohio State, but I want to save on that housing and dining, so I'm going to live at home, right? Still make sure you're getting involved in student activities, because that is truly when you feel like you're connected with your institution. I've attended 3 different universities. My favorite school is Ohio University, because that's where I got the most involved. Through my involvement, I got hired on with their admissions office, and I landed into a career that I love. So if you get up, get out of your room, and get involved in something that interests you, you can form connections with your university, whether you're living on campus or commuting.
Where do they go? So, you walk on campus as a freshman, and you know their student organization. So how do they learn about those? How do they get connected?
So from my understanding, when you go through orientation, they'll tell you how to get connected. I know that there is a student organization platform that like a lot of universities are moving towards. It's called the Hub. Or even if you just look on the university's website and Google university name, student organizations, and it'll take you to their landing page, and then usually there's just like a whole list of organizations that they have. And then you can go through, and then usually they'll have a contact information with like membership signups, or like the leader, like the president of the organization, it'll have their contact information. A lot of times, universities, they know that every year they're having freshmen on campus. And a lot of times during that first semester, there'll be a big career fair where colleges and universities will have all of their organizations come out and recruit new members. So those are some ways, like either looking on the student organization webpage or figuring out when the student organization fair is. That's some ways to find different student organizations.
At Ohio State, they do an involvement fair, so specifically all of the student organizations who can get out there, which is some bizarre number of over 200 right now, I think, come out on the Oval, and they set up with information so students can come and they can meet folks and they can learn more about what these programs are doing. So it's really great. All incoming freshmen also take a survey class, so that's like your transition to college class, and a lot of times those opportunities are provided where a guest speaker will come in, or that information is sort of divulged to them in some manner, maybe just via Carmen, or they're talking about the website where the student organizations are and they have an activity out of that. So the information's accessible, but sometimes you do have to go out and look for it.
Any other questions? Well, thank you all for coming. I appreciate it very much. They're going to hang around for just a few more minutes, so if you have questions about your individual child and what they may need once they go to college, or specific questions that just relate to your family, feel free to ask them, okay? Thank you very much.